What we're hoping that the book will do is reach people who perhaps are not aware of what's happened to people who are injured. And this isn't just what's happening to Bree. This is what's happening to other people in America, other injured in America. This is what's happening to the injured all over the world.
We suffered adverse events from the COVID vaccines. It's directly documented from the NIH. They promised us that they were going to inform the public about these types of complications after COVID vaccination from Pfizer, Moderna, J&J, and AstraZeneca. And instead, they stopped talking to all of the participants, and they started literally telling reporters that were contacting them, asking them about the study, that there was not a study going on. That's what our government did to the people that were harmed by COVID vaccines. No one in the United States can sue if they are injured by a COVID vaccine, period.
You know that people were in such despair that they chose to leave, to take their life. And I think it's important that people know that.
Feeling that there is no purpose to your existing. And if the censorship hadn't happened, there would still be people alive. We would have all been able to communicate very openly with each other, with our families. It would have been featured in the media. Our doctors, we could have had conversations with our doctors.
And I will fight for their healing until my dying breath. I want to be remembered as a mom and someone who just really wanted to do good for society, for her fellow man.
But I would like to be remembered as somebody who brought comfort and maybe made people feel less alone in the world.
Welcome to the React 19 podcast, where we bring awareness and support to the COVID-19 vaccine injured and discuss the science, research, and laws that affect all of us. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us again today. I'm Ann Forty with the React 19 podcast. And with every podcast interview that I've done, I've had the immense privilege to meet some incredible people, ordinary people who've been living through extraordinarily hard times, which has given them a strength that they didn't know that they possessed. And one of the reasons that so many of these voices have been able to be heard across the globe is because of the work of my two guests today, both COVID-19 vaccine injured themselves, co-founder of React 19, Brianne Dressen, and award-winning author and member of UK CV family, Caroline Pover. And they are here today to give us a glimpse of the tragedy that so many faced in their new book, which is called Worth a Shot: Secrets of the Clinical Trial Participant Who Inspired a Global Movement. Thank you both for being here today to share with the audience this powerful and remarkable real-life story that many people simply have not heard. So, hello to you both.
Hello.
It's just good to see you both here. But I want to say, before we get into the details of how this book came to be, I'd like to say right from the beginning, anyone who may not have the time to make it through all the way to the end of the podcast, because some people are like, oh, they have to run off to something. I want to let you know right now, there's a link in the show notes that you'll be able to find to pre-order this book, because this is not just a gripping and compelling story. This is a history book that you're going to want to have in your library, because it is a book that will tell generations to come of the truth of what so many people did not know during the greatest pandemic of our lifetime that took away the civil liberties of millions of people throughout the world with devastating consequences. And also, if you do any kind of advocacy work where you've always wanted to share something with a friend or a family member, a lawmaker or a journalist, and you've wanted to do it in a non-threatening way, this is the book to accomplish that goal of starting a conversation. So now that everybody knows what a great book this is and where to get it, let's get back to talking about how this came to be. And so, Bree, you don't really need any introduction to those within the vaccine injured community, but for anyone who might be listening in who really has no idea about your backstory, could you just please share about how you got here? How did you get here?
Yeah, so I was a clinical trial participant in a COVID vaccine trial here in the United States for AstraZeneca, and my reaction started within an hour My symptoms continued to progress over the next 2.5 weeks until I landed in the hospital, where I was gaslit, dismissed by my doctors. The test clinic and the drug company continued to struggle with getting any kind of information back to me. The drug company decided that they just didn't want to help me at all. And then it turned into this permanent, chronic, severe condition that I continue to struggle with to this day, where, we got the government involved, we spoke out on social media and were censored, and it just opened up this whole world of what I had no idea would actually happen to someone if they ended up on the opposite end of a political agenda. Because for me, this is just a medical issue. It wasn't a political one.
In a bit, we can talk about all the different lawsuits that you're in. But now to bring Carolyn to you, you here are an award-winning author, an entrepreneur, a public speaker, and a philanthropist. And you're basically Bree's equivalent in the UK. And can you just please tell us how you got here?
I don't know if I'm Bree's equivalent, but that I'll take that honor. Thank you. I was diagnosed with an adverse reaction to the also the AstraZeneca vaccine on the day that I had it. So I had about over 40 different symptoms in the weeks and months that followed, and then it kind of morphed into, similar to Bree, a very long-term going illness that I still struggle with every day.
So I think one thing I want to point out right at the beginning, because you two can look really great sitting here and healthy. And I just want people to know the reality of the fact that, Bree, you've shared that to this day, you feel like you're being electrocuted 24/7 and often find yourself in a wheelchair.
Every once in a while, I still need mobility aids. My most debilitating issues is actually not if my legs stop working, but it's this painful nerve damage that I continue to face on a daily basis. So yeah,
Okay.
it's an invisible illness. It's something that people don't really understand unless they're going through it. But that's what we're hoping that we can get through to people today, is to help them understand that this invisible illness really is something that they should be taking seriously, and help people around them who are dealing with it, but also be prepared in case it happens to themselves.
And I'd like to just tell how I got here briefly, and that is I'd been logging vaccine injuries almost since the beginning of the rollout. I just saw them just showing up all over on social media. And then on June 28th, 2021, I happened to catch Ron Johnson's press conference, where Bree, you were part of that, along with SHARYL and Maddie DeGary's mom and others. And I just sat there and cried as I listened to all of you, because it wasn't just AstraZeneca, it was J&J, it was Moderna, it was Pfizer. And I was thinking to myself, I was so just sad for what you guys had gone through. But I was thinking, oh my goodness, they're finally going to get the help that they need, and people are going to hear about this. And then the next day, nothing, all that was talked about, how Ron Johnson was a dangerous man and spreading all this misinformation. And then it happened again in November, where he brought more doctors, more evidence, more of the injured. And the same thing happened. It was so remarkable to me that so many of you were living through this nightmare and just being mocked or saying this wasn't happening. And it's still happening today. As you know, Bree, yesterday, Jerome Adams, who is he's a doctor, and he has been a Surgeon General. He was Indiana's former state health commissioner. He said, if hundreds of thousands of people had been died or injured by COVID vaccines, we would know. I mean, then he mocked you with, this kind of tinfoil hat meme. And here we are 4 years out. And this is why this book is so incredibly important, because people need to know the truth of what has happened. And that's what you do so well. So with either one of you, if you just want to walk us through the book, some of the key points, and what your hope is for this book.
What we're hoping that the book will do is reach people who perhaps are not aware of what's happened to people who are injured. It's not about convincing anybody of anything other than this is what happens if you have an adverse reaction. And this isn't just what's happening to Brie. This is what's happening to other people in America, other injured in America. This is what's happening to the injured all over the world. And that's what this book says. So it doesn't talk about we don't go into the pros and cons. It's just a very, very human story. And people who are either very pro-vaccination, pro-COVID vaccination, or pro-vaccination in general, and people who are against or questioning, it can be very easy for people to get quite angry and emotional and talk statistics and get become very animated talking on either side. And what often gets missed is the very human story. What happens to your life? What happens to your family? What happens to your kids? What happens to your relationship? Not just what happens to your health. What happens to your community? What happens to your support network? What happens to your money? What happens to your sense of identity? And all of those things are what's missing from a lot of the conversations. And you can't even share those things in a podcast like this, no matter how many times Brie's been interviewed, no matter how many even documentaries that are made, no matter how many people who are blogging about it. You can't share the real details of everything and the feelings behind all of that in anything other than a book, I think, because a book will take you directly through that experience in a way that other medium doesn't. That's a very long way of answering your question. I probably haven't answered it. But.
Oh, yeah, yes, definitely you have. And Brie, what would you like to add to that?
Oh, I mean, Caroline has done something that we've all been waiting for, to be completely honest. We've been hoping to be able to put together this type of narrative for years. There's nothing that's been said like this so far. This is the story that has not been told. And this is also, put together in a way that is relatable to everyday people. So this isn't just for people that already know that this is an issue. This is for people that we wish knew about this issue. This is for the person that that you wish would just take a minute to listen to your side and your perspective. And that's where the power of this book really lies, is with its non-confrontational context, to just get people to listen to a reality that they probably most likely have not heard. And there's even people that are aware of this issue. I guarantee you they have not heard this story. So there's something for everybody.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. I mean, I've followed this so intensely over the last 4 years, in all my conversations with you, but still reading it. Carolyn, you write in such a way that the reader just feels like they're right there with Brie as she's sitting there in that room, where she's getting the vaccines, the thoughts that are going through her head as she's, contemplating all these different things. And you just the exasperation you can feel, like when all the money's gone and when nobody's listening, and, people in the groups are being split apart, and in the support groups. And you do that. It's a simple book. It's not technical. It's easy to read. And I think I heard you say that, Brie, that you didn't want to give somebody, or both of you and Caroline, you didn't want to give somebody, a 500-page book that was going to take forever. You just wanted something that was pretty short. It was easy. And like you said, I don't think this is the story that people don't know, but they need to know. And it's done in such a remarkable way. I want to bring this up, Brie, because I think it's so important. You've got a couple of lawsuits coming up. One of them has to do with, you know, as you've said before, you've never filed suit against anyone. And the first one was against the Biden administration for the censorship. And I do not believe that people understand the level of the censorship industrial complex, or whatever you want to call it. And I think it's so important. You had said, and you relay this in the book, you know, you'd said that after the press conference, I think it was the second press conference, and if I don't have this right, let me know, in November, that the social media companies went in, like, I don't know if it was the next day, and maybe it was in the June one, the very next day, your groups
June.
were taken. Okay, maybe so. It was the June one. Okay,
it was the very first one.
The first one in June. They took your groups, and one of the groups they took, these groups were the only support group that some people had, because they couldn't. Their doctors were blowing them off. Their families, everywhere. They had no place else to go but these support groups. Facebook took them down, and that was the only lifeline. And you know that people were in such despair that they chose to leave, to take their life. And I think it's important that people know that.
Yeah, so in June of 2021, I finally broke my silence. It's about 7 or 8 months into my own harrowing experience after my COVID vaccine injury. And we went to a press conference. There was mainstream media there. There were a couple of reporters that were even crying while they were listening to our stories. And we thought that that was where our work had ended. But the reality is that's when our work just began. And that's when the war against the COVID vaccine injured began here in the United States. And it started with a support group getting shut down within 24 hours of that initial press conference. And 5 days later, another support group, actually adminned by Caroline Pover, the writer of this book, with over 3,000 members, was shut down. And between Caroline and I, between those two groups, we lost over 4,000 people just like that. And we had people at that point, there were no utterances whatsoever of any vaccine injuries in the media, through the scientific community, through the medical community. The government was pushing extremely hard to make sure that everybody was going to line up and confidently get a shot in their arm to, quote unquote, end the pandemic. But Caroline and I, were on the front lines, and we saw firsthand just what happened to these people when their one connection to others, their only lifeline, their only line of support was abruptly cut off. And the casualties it was substantial. And to say that it was an insult to injury is an understatement.
And if the censorship hadn't happened, there would still be people alive, and there wouldn't be a need we wouldn't have written the book. If the censorship hadn't happened, we would have all been able to communicate very openly with each other, with our families. It would have been featured in the media. Our doctors, we could have had conversations with our doctors, and we wouldn't need any of this advocacy if it was recognised and if the censorship hadn't been so bad. I'm still meeting people now, almost 4 years on, who have believed for the last 4 years that they're the only ones suffering.
That's incredible. That's incredible. But you know what? After, like I said, just, you know, some of the interactions that just recently are still on social media within the last 24 hours, where people just say, we would know about this if this would have happened. And surely this is it. Surely our government wouldn't do this to us. The people, you know, somehow we think the gods of truth live at the FDA, the CDC, and the NIH. And it's remarkable, because here again, how many people, I'm going to tell the story that, Bree, you were flown out to the NIH in January of 2021, that the NIH knew that there were thousands of injuries taking place. They flew you out and others. They said that they were going to help you. They said that they would let the public know what was happening. And none of that happened. So Could you please tell the world that that actually did happen?
Yeah, 100%. So in January 2021, the NIH launched a study to evaluate neurological complications to the COVID vaccines. And they started flying people out in March of 2021. I went to the National Institutes of Health to participate in this study personally in June of 2021. They flew me in. They had extreme security to get in there. There were bomb sniffing dogs that went around the car. You had x-ray machines going through all of your belongings. So it was a secure, real study at the NIH. And there they evaluated us. They gave us proper diagnoses, which was not FND or some other fringe diagnosis. Yeah, they diagnosed us with post-vaccine neuropathy. We were not dismissed at the NIH. They promised us that they were going to inform the public about these types of complications after COVID vaccination from Pfizer, Moderna, J&J, and AstraZeneca. And instead, what they did was collect the data, sent us home, tracked us at home. And by the time the OSHA mandates popped up, the study had been completely shut off. They stopped talking to all of the participants. And they started literally telling reporters that were contacting them, asking them about the study, that there was not a study going on, that, you know, the vaccines are safe, that you need to go get your shot. And we, the participants in the study, were not going to stand for that. And that's when we started screaming a little bit louder, reaching out to more and more media until we finally got a bite from mainstream news outlet, Science Magazine. And Science was the first mainstream article, mainstream news coverage to actually talk about COVID vaccine adverse events being studied by the federal government. Now, what's important about this is we were not dismissed by the federal government. They validated each and every one of us. It's directly documented on several of our email strings and our medical records directly from the NIH. We suffered adverse events from the COVID vaccines, period. This isn't some fringe outlier thing, okay? The government acknowledged what was going on with us. They studied it. They promised us that if we were quiet, that they would go out and inform the world what was going on, and they went silent. That's what our government did to the people that were harmed by COVID vaccines.
It is just stunning. It is just stunning what has happened. And the other thing along with this is how many times all of you went to the New York Times. I think you said twice you heard from New York Times reporters that they told you that they couldn't say this story, like they wanted to, but they could. Well, I don't know if they wanted to, but whoever you met with, they couldn't tell. In the LA Times, again and again and again, you would have people, you would have journalists that would sit and listen and cry with you and then write nothing.
Yeah, so the mainstream media censorship was pretty interesting to see firsthand because I was listening to NPR. I was watching a little bit of CNN. I was very much consuming mainstream media. And so they were the first people that I reached out to. And of course, none of them could cover it. There were two different reporters at New York Times that told me that they're sorry, but they can't make the vaccines look bad. This was in 2021. And then there was a mainstream reporter here locally who informed me that the hospital system and the state healthcare system, the state health department threatened her after she ran a story telling her to shut up or else. So there's multiple different angles that were causing these reporters to essentially shut up or else. They all were concerned about their jobs at the end of the day. The pressures came from their sponsorship, Pfizer and Moderna, and other facets, actually, like the federal government. And then also there were local health departments. There was the AMA, and there was just immense pressure from the federal government, who had put out over $10 billion in federal taxpayer dollars to increase COVID vaccine uptake as it became very evident that the vaccines were not as easy and common sense of a sell. And there was just so many people that were holding out on getting their vaccines that they just wanted to pump more money, more of this aggressive narrative into the public space, just trying to force everyone's hand to make sure that they got a shot. What they failed to do, the federal government and the drug companies, was to go back and funnel even a tenth, not even 1% of the amount of money that they pushed to develop and get those shots in arms. Not even 1% of that amount went into addressing the harms and making sure that the safety monitoring was robust, that it was transparent, and that it was being rolled out within quickly with almost real-time results. And still there's a myriad of those side effects that the American public still has yet to know. But over in Europe and different countries in Europe, there are several of these side effects that have been disclosed. So I would really encourage people to stop looking at what they're being fed through this curated machine that is American mainstream media and start just looking beyond, listening to those little things that they're hearing on the side, and start actually looking at what mainstream authorities are doing in countries like Sweden, Switzerland, Germany in particular. These are countries that are not holding the mRNA technology to this perfect standard like we are in the US. And there's much more nuance that's emerging through these countries that don't have such a strong financial stake as the United States does in the mRNA technology.
So remarkable. And Caroline, you just write this story so well. I mean, it's really a page turner in all of this. And in your own country, you know, same thing happening. I don't know if you'd like to share a little bit. I know this story is about Bree, but you certainly come with a story from your part of the world and your experiences as well.
I think with the book, actually, somebody who did made a documentary about us here in the UK. I gave him an advance copy to read, and he said, because he knew me, he could read me in it. So even though it was about Bree, there was a lot of I did put a lot of my heart into that, and a lot of things that I also experienced, and the way I responded to them and how those things made me feel was the same as Bree. Bree and I found a lot. I mean, we clicked as soon as we met a few years ago now, but through this process, we learned that there were an awful lot of similarities between us, between our backgrounds, between this experience and the way that we approach the world. So for me, I was able to put into words Bree's experience in a way that she probably wasn't able to put into herself. It's always difficult, isn't it, for a lot of people, most people, to be able to talk about their own experience in a slightly more detached way. And I think because I'd been through that, and through the writing process, I'm able to just take a step back anyway. Even writing about my own experiences, I can take a step back, and I was able to do that. So I was able to use my experience in a way to benefit the book. It wasn't just it didn't feel like I didn't feel like I was writing about a stranger, and Bree would probably agree to say it didn't feel like a stranger was writing about her either.
Yeah, you definitely don't get that. It is a very personal book, a very personal book. And again, you take the reader, the reader feels like they're right there. And Bree, now going back to lawsuits, your other lawsuit you have coming up here was against AstraZeneca, because here again, when you sat down, you were promised, oh, we're going to take care of you if anything goes wrong. I mean, you felt confident in going through this. And I think people should know, I mean, your heart was like totally in this. What can I do for my country? You were sewing masks for people at the hospital. You wanted to step up and be part of the solution, proud to do it, willing to do it. And then just the absolute abandonment you faced. Again, with people the world over. And I think in talking about two things with the lawsuit, well, I don't, you know, you have the lawsuit with AstraZeneca if you want to talk about that. But then again, the problem that everyone has with a vaccine injury, with a lawsuit, at least here in the United States, is the PrEP Act and how people have no idea. And again, the focus of your book is informed consent. And so that's kind of what I'm trying to get here, is that when people sat down to get the shot, like you did, you thought you were informed, but you weren't. And you had no idea that you were giving up your rights to everything. So if you could talk about that a little bit to help the listeners understand really what went down.
Yeah, so the clinical trial, walking through this process as a participant was very eye-opening. Before I enrolled in the clinical trial, I didn't know that there was a law called the PrEP Act that was providing the drug companies blanket immunity. Before I enrolled, I didn't know that the drug company themselves had paid these testing sites directly, and they were dictating exactly what the test sites could and couldn't do. I also didn't know that the drug companies were the ones that were able to design the study. And anyone with a brain would understand that the people that are paying for a study that fare to benefit from the sale of the product are going to design a study that's going to end in favorable results. So there were several things within the study itself that leaned, you know, clues to how this was going to end in a biased study result. And one of those was even just how we could report the side effects. The side effects were on a bullet list. And it was headaches, soreness at the injection site, nausea, some very simple expected side effects. Anything like dizziness, pins and needles, hair loss, extreme weight loss, limb weakness, tachycardia, bradycardia, heart attack, stroke, anything that's really concerning, you had to manually call into the test clinic to report those. And as soon as it becomes data that the participant themselves cannot directly enter into a system, you're losing it to reporting bias. The test clinic is going to be able to interpret any of those symptoms and water them down into a different type of report. The whole structure of what I thought I was signing up for, you know, that most importantly, that side effects to a product would be tracked and monitored appropriately. It didn't happen. AstraZeneca, in their report that came out in the New England Journal of Medicine, they state that they follow all adverse events for 730 days. They stopped tracking me at day 60. They also claim that people that didn't get the second dose are essentially dropouts of the study. They chose to forego getting the second dose, which is untrue in my case. They told me not to get the second dose because of my severe adverse event to the first vaccine. So we're dropouts, but we're dropouts because their product harmed us. But that's not what they're telling the public. So when I look at that study that they released for the public to review and the scientific community to review, knowing what was missing in that report, I see that as nothing more than a marketing piece. That's not what I signed up for. I signed up to be part of the scientific process, and that's not what I got. So unfortunately, the drug company didn't follow through with their obligations in the contract to help us medically if there was a problem, and also help us financially if there was a problem. And because of that reason, the only reason that I actually do have a possible pathway forward for a lawsuit is because of that contract. I am not suing because I was injured. Just want to make that perfectly clear. No one in the United States can sue if they are injured by a COVID vaccine, period, including me. The only reason I am able to seek any kind of restitution is because of the contract signed directly with the drug company.
And I think it's important, again, for people to realize that because of the PrEP Act, you lose all your rights. You can't sue anybody, not the manufacturer, not the government, no one. You will be, and Bree, you've said it, I don't know how many times, you will be completely on your own. Your doctors won't know what to do with you. The government's not going to be there to help you. The manufacturers aren't going to be there to help you. And you have gone in, I mean, I don't know how much money, you're in on this. I mean, I know you've had to remortgage your home. You lost all of your financial security. And I think AstraZeneca offered you $1,200. I mean, it is insane.
Yeah, so my final settlement offer was for $1,200, and I had to absolve them of all future payments and absolve them of any wrongdoing on their part.
If you wanted that $1,200.
Yeah. So the quality of life, my value of my life to the drug company is worth $1,200.
People need to know this. I'm just so glad, Caroline, you've just written this book and told the story. I have to say, how have both of you kept from sinking? I mean, you've had billions, you've been trying to tell you these stories. You've had billions of dollars from government agencies, just saying you don't even exist. And how do you keep getting up? How have you continued to keep getting up, to keep going? I'd really like you to talk about, Bree, how you started React 19, and Caroline, your work with UKCV. But whoever wants to start, Bree or Caroline, how do you keep from sinking?
I think we keep each other from sinking, and we regularly sink. It's been a regular kind of, you crash and you fall down and you're physically unwell, and that obviously affects then how emotionally you feel. You've had everything taken away from you. So these sinks or crashes or whatever you want to call them, they are pretty regular, and we get each other back up. That's what we do, and that's what UKCV Family does. That's what React 19 does. That's what Bree and I do for each other. That's what the friends that we've made through this experience, and hopefully that comes through in the book too, and that sense of community, and
it does,
and the sense of how many of us are there, because we don't have anybody else. We have each other, and so we keep each other going. And those of us in kind of advocacy or slightly more public vaccine injured, we have a responsibility to people who are very private about their injury, and we have a responsibility to keep going. We have to keep going, but the strength comes from each other. There's nothing. I don't want to make it sound like we're anything special, or we have some special ability that makes us keep going. It's not like that at all. We struggle just as much as everybody else, and we're no different from people who regularly sink. We sink as well all the time, but we just keep each other going.
For me, this is hard. This has been the hardest experience of my life by far. It's something that I face every single day when I wake up. During the process of writing this book, there were multiple instances where Caroline was sinking and she was struggling and she was in immense emotional and physical pain. And when that happens, everything stops. Time stops, all projects stop, everything stops. And we have to take that time to center ourselves and think about what it is that we actually need for ourselves. And that's when we, just like everybody else in our community, we need the support of our community at that time as well, because nobody else understands what we're going through other than people that are going through it with us. And it's been incredibly humbling, and it felt like a privilege for me to be able to walk through that with Caroline, to share those times with her as she was, digging herself out of these big holes that we all end up in this situation. And it's a gift to be able to share that level of vulnerability with other people. And it's essentially why we've been able to build this new family unit, essentially through this level of suffering that we all endure. But for one thing that's helped me through this, just like Caroline said, there's no magic solution. But for me, there's been a couple of things where I don't want to be consumed by anger to the point that my pain and my suffering grows worse. I don't. I want to make sure that the energy that I have can be used to care for my children, like my little girl that sings all the time with her big voice, and my son, who is almost as tall as me now, but he still needs his mom just as much as he did when he was half my size. You know, that energy is precious, and the energy is precious for every single person who's suffering physically, whether it's from a vaccine or from another pharmaceutical. And I'm super stubborn. I want to make sure that I don't give the drug companies any more of me than they have already taken. And a big part of that has been to channel my energy, figuring out and doing the best I can to focus and move that anger through my body, because it still happens. I still feel massively betrayed. I still feel massively hurt, right? But at the end of the day, I can do my best by processing that anger in a healthy way, so it moves through my mind and my body and moves out, so that I can have healing, peaceful energy. And that's my focus, is to push through those emotions, acknowledge them when they come, accept those feelings, right? But then move through them and then get back to a place where I can focus on healing, I can focus on love, and I can push through to help other people through a foundation of love and hope. So hopefully that made sense.
Oh, definitely. And I think you two both know very intimately, the thousands of people that you've walked through this with, and you know the anger they're feeling. You know people right now who don't know if they're going to have enough money for rent at the end of the month. They don't know. I mean, some people who've lost their houses. You've known people that have they've lost their jobs, they've lost their health, they've lost their entire life savings. They don't know how they're going to make it tomorrow. And I think the work that you've done with React 19 and with UKCV, I mean, as you've just talked about, you want to proceed with love, and you want to proceed with people just opening up and having these conversations. So you understand the anger, but I get the impression you're asking people who are literally at their wits' ends to just say, keep going. I mean, is that your advice to somebody who's like, hey, Bree, I get all the love stuff and I get that you want this, but I'm going to lose it. I'm ready to move to a right to die state because nobody's listening. What can you tell me, Bree?
Well, so for me, this is probably one of the most challenging questions I'll ever be asked, because I myself don't want to ever tell someone else how to endure their own suffering, because at the end of the day, they're the ones that are experiencing everything they're experiencing, and they're the ones that know just how impossible it is to endure the next minute, the next hour, the next day, the next week. I can deeply, deeply empathize with them, and I will, without question, let them know that I will fight for them and for their rights, for their health, for their just human right to be seen. And I will fight for their healing until my dying breath, without question. And that comes from a deeply rooted place of love, because every single one of these people that I've talked to, and walking through this myself with them, they've left such a deep imprint on my heart. there is no way, no possible way that I could walk away from these people. Now, with that said, I don't know what that will amount to in the big scheme of things, but I will, continue vowing my loyalty to these people, to do everything that I can to make some kind of difference for them. At the end of the day, the drug companies are going to be against us. The government's going to be against us. And hopefully we can get both of those to change through the court system and through continuing to show up and apply pressure where is necessary. These guys are all waiting us out, and they want nothing more than for us to just go away and die quietly. It is up to us to figure out if we can keep showing up, if we can keep forcing their hand. And that's going to be a very long, arduous journey for all of us in this community. And so whatever people are able to do just to exist on a daily level, whatever they are able to do just to exist by an hour by hour basis, I just want to say I am so glad that you exist. Even if you're in your bed and you haven't showered for 3 weeks and there's an imprint in your mattress now because of your amazing little body just breathing and being there, I am so grateful that you exist.
Thank you for that, Bree. Caroline, would you like to add to that?
I guess there's two things about that kind of topic about I have a doggy wanting to join us. There's two things related to that topic. Firstly, chapter 4 is very, as you know, Anne, very explicit about that particular topic and about people wanting to live or not wanting to live. And I was very explicit about that because I hope that people around somebody who's injured and is in a very desperate situation, but not understanding why and not being particularly sympathetic, I really, really hope that chapter opens their eyes to exactly how they're feeling, we have felt. I hope that. And I suppose another thought on that, I was surprised when we announced the book, because we were very quiet about it. Hardly anybody knew that the book was going on. I wrote it in secret for the last 3 months. So when it was announced, it was a big surprise to a lot of people. And I was surprised at the encouragement I felt people had at the knowledge that Bree and I were working together. And it hadn't occurred to me that the idea of us collaborating would bring people hope somehow. So even though the book's about a very difficult topic, the fact that it exists and the fact that we're both still working very hard on it and promoting it or making sure the word is out there, that in itself, I feel, is giving some people encouragement and hope. And there are people who knew of us individually. I don't think they realized that we were very close friends. So I think that just brought some, dare I say, even a little bit of joy to some people. That was the response, wasn't it, Brie? When online, it was really, and that really took me aback. So hopefully the existence of the book is something that might just keep people going a little bit. And I think just that open honesty that we had, that's a chapter that there's a lot of me in that one too. And that raw honesty and vulnerability and willingness to say, yes, I've been there, and yes, I felt like that. Hopefully that will make other people feel slightly less alone as well, because those thoughts are very difficult to articulate. And feeling that there is no purpose to your existence, that's a very difficult thing to come out and admit to anybody. And we don't like the thought of anybody feeling they're alone with those thoughts. So sometimes when you say things, you express them, or you know of somebody else that you might relate to who feels the same way, they can then make those feelings immediately feel just slightly less overwhelming. But again, like Brie, I don't have any judgment on however anybody chooses to live or not live their life.
Very, very, very true words. And for those who are listening in, who are, hanging on, you do list resources in your book, but could Brie, I guess we'll start with you. Could you just briefly, for anyone who may not know, can you briefly just tell about React 19, how it came into existence and what it offers?
Yeah, React 19 came into existence essentially because we realized the government wasn't going to do their job, so somebody had to. So it was founded by clinical trial participants and medical professionals that were injured by the COVID vaccines in the United States. We incorporated officially as a registered nonprofit in November of 2021 with Joel Walskog, who's an injured orthopedist out of Wisconsin, and myself. We have a science branch, which is really pushing the front on research. We have a couple of research projects that we have issued grants for, and our own research project for anyone that's injured by a COVID vaccine to participate in. This is something that is near and dear to my heart because we're very much a science-based organization. We also have an underground provider network. So any providers that are willing to acknowledge and treat COVID vaccine injuries, we'd love to talk to you. We also have a medical grant program, which has issued over $880,000 to date to people who are suffering lasting adverse events to the COVID vaccines. These go to straight up medical expenses out of pocket. We don't pay for travel. We don't pay for loss of income, although all of that is really important, but it's, the need is great. And we only have so much as far as financial resources to dedicate to that. We have 15 people on the waiting list for that grant program right now. So the need is far outpacing our ability to raise the funds. People are able to donate directly to that fund if they wish. And through Caroline and my combining and joining forces, as we'd say, through the book, we're going to be launching a special fund where 50% of the proceeds will be going to UKCV Family, which is our equivalent in the UK, and React 19. Both of these are nonprofits that are registered, run by volunteers, and they're launched by the injured for the injured.
Very important for people to know, I don't know that we touched on it earlier, that the program that was designed that was supposed to help people who were COVID-19 vaccine injured, the CICP program, has rejected 97% of the claims or 98% of the claims. I don't know, it's paid out 40,000 or something, I think like 8 claims or something. And again, because you can't admit something's wrong, because then what? If the government...
We have about the same rejection rate in the UK.
Yeah, and so people really have no place to go. And I just really want listeners to understand that. No, the government is not helping. These people have nowhere to go. And every dime, if you can give something, again, there will be a link in the show notes. Everybody's just trying to be a lifeline to somebody else. And so just please know that, and whatever you might be able to do to help your fellow man just get through the next day. So one other question I'd like to ask each of you is, what is the greatest thing that you have learned through all of this? Brie, if you'd like to start.
Yeah, I've learned that the world is not what I thought it was. This is completely shook my foundation of everything that I believed in. But in restructuring that belief system of what the world and how the world works, it's also exposed an incredible amount of love and beauty in humanity that I didn't know existed. before this. And I didn't know what the power of love is really capable of until I walked through this myself with other people like me. So yeah, that's what I've learned.
Well, seeing the best and the worst. Caroline, how about you? What is the greatest thing you've learned through all of this?
I've learned a lot. I've already, through past activities, let's call it, in my life. So I spent a lot of time with survivors of the tsunami in Japan in 2011. So I have seen there the best and worst of humanity. So often I think trauma, any traumatic experience, whether that's physical, spiritual, whatever you want to call it, it has a tendency to expose the best and the worst of humanity. So I've seen that before. I've seen what love's capable of, seeing that again now. I've also had my worldview shattered, but I think a little bit was falling apart over the last decade anyway. So perhaps my shock factor has been slightly less than Bree's. I wasn't watching the news or television before I got injured anyway. So I think I've got to a point where I'm less inclined to assume what I know is the truth. You know, that way that we all think, I believe this, therefore this is the truth. And I think that might be the biggest thing that I've learned, is that the truth, reality, it's changing all the time. And what we know is based on what we've been exposed to over the last decades or our entire lives. And those things are all dependent on whatever media or people that we're exposed to. I've learned to be very comfortable with having a very, very open mind about everything now. And what I think I know is the truth right now might not be the truth in 5 years, 5 months, even in 5 weeks' time. All the time there's something new that we are learning that can change our worldview. And I think that's a good thing to have as open a mind as I've found that I have now. Nice. And I think underneath all of that, what really, really matters, because those things can change all the time, is our compassion for each other and our love for each other. And if we try to hold more tightly onto that, those things are more important than our opinions about things that are in a lot of ways are out of our control.
Oh, so true. So much truth in all of that. And you really see, you know, the greatest damage through so much of this is hubris. They're just the pride that has kept people from wanting to listen, to, you know, wanting to hang on to their truth. And again, your book, the way you're a wordsmith, and the way that you've conveyed this, I just hope will open up that clenched fist and have
I think it will challenge everybody's worldview, whatever they think and wherever they are. And I think whether they're injured or not injured, whatever their stance on vaccines, whatever their stance on healthcare or on politics, I think it will be unexpected for everybody in at least some way.
I agree. And that's why I think it's
not what people think.
And that's another reason to share it, because you're not, there's no real pointing of fingers. It's just kind of the statement of fact of what has happened and how do we go forward. And I will put in the show notes a link to your website. You have a fascinating background in the work that you've done. We didn't get a whole lot of time to talk about that, but I would encourage people definitely to check out your website as well. I guess I'd like to ask you both, what would you like your legacy to be? You know, as people look back, how do you want people to, Bree, how do you want people to remember Bree Dressen?
Honestly, I don't want to be remembered as an injured person. I want to be remembered as a mom and someone who just really wanted to do good for society, for her fellow man. That's it. I hope that through more powerful people than us, that we'll be able to inspire those in power to really take a look at this type of damage that can be done by pharmaceuticals and to make essential changes to provide appropriate consumer protections in addition to helping those that are harmed by drugs.
All right, Caroline.
It's okay.
Caroline Pover, your legacy.
I don't know. I've never really thought about that. What do I want to, to leave behind? I live a bit kind of in the now, and but like Brie, I don't particularly. I think anybody who is vaccine injured, nobody wants to identify as being vaccine injured. Nobody wants that to be what everybody remembers them for. I've had a lot of very interesting adventures in my life, and I think I'd probably rather be remembered for some of those. I'd rather be remembered for, wearing my Wonder Woman costume randomly and making people laugh. And I'd rather be remembered for bringing joy into the world than sadness. But I would like to be remembered as somebody who brought comfort and maybe made people feel less alone in the world. That would be quite nice.
I definitely think that both of you have accomplished your legacy. And Brie, I want to, at the end of the book, you share a very poignant letter with your two children, and I won't read the whole thing, but I'd like to read a couple of sentences, and that is, "With all I have left, I will stand between you and the power that grips the world to ensure they can never hurt you beyond what they've already have. I will continue to fight and make sure my beautiful babies are loved, guided, and protected every day." And I want to thank you both so much for showing up every day and fighting in the midst of the pain, the abuse, the cruelty, the censorship, the chaos, and saying, I may not know how this ends, but it's worth a shot to do something to help the person in front of me today. And I hope everybody who's listening goes to the show notes, click on that link to order the book, because again, this is a book you can share without fear. This is a book that can start a conversation. And that is certainly worth a shot to start. And so I just thank you. I thank you for everything it took to write this book. And I really hope that the fruit, I know it is going to bear immense fruit, and we will all enjoy the harvest of your work. So thank you.